Napoleon I of France met Marie Walewska, a Polish countess, in 1807 when he went to Poland during his military campaigns. He was 37 years old and at the height of his political and military power. Impressed by her beauty, Napoleon fell in love with her and she became his mistress. Her life would become linked to his, and their future would be shaped by that encounter. Their story has since been considered as one of the greatest love stories of all time. But who was Marie Countess Walewska? Today, we shall follow her story. She was born on the 7th of December 1786 in Poland and belonged to a wealthy noble family. She received her education whilst growing up at her family's residence, and one of her tutors was Nicolas Chopin, the father of the famous Polish pianist. After her father's death, the family ran into financial difficulties, and in 1804 Marie married the wealthy Count Athanasius Walewski. She was 18 and he was 68. It was an arranged marriage, but in 1805 the couple had a son, Antony Rudolph. Marie met Napoleon at a ball in Warsaw in January 1807, held in his honor. The Polish people perceived the emperor as a liberator, a savior of their country, divided by the neighboring empires Prussia, Russia, and Austria. Poland had ceased to exist as a nation-state. There were only a few scattered provinces under foreign rule, and Poland as such did not show on the map. Although Marie had not initially wanted to attend the ball, she eventually gave in. Wearing a velvet dress matching her blue eyes and contrasting with her blonde hair, Marie was looking splendid. The emperor started courting her, but the countess did not seem impressed by his advances and his romantic letters. A hopeless romantic, Napoleon, sent her a written note in which he was saying that he had been admiring her the entire evening and he had been impressed by her beauty. He invited her to dinner the following day. The emperor, of course, was in a rush. Although Walewska was a practicing Catholic, married and the mother of a child, the people around Marie started pressuring her to accept the invitation. Even her husband, who was a passionate patriot, asked her to do it. The hope was that if Napoleon had a lover belonging to the Polish aristocracy, maybe that would benefit the aspiring ideal of an independent Poland. Marie was torn between her duty to her country and her feelings. According to her own admission, she entered into a relationship with him in order to help secure Poland's future. Marie Walewska became the emperor's mistress, as Napoleon himself told later to Las Casas in his daily conversations with the Count, who accompanied him in exile on the island of St. Helena. He really cared for her, perhaps he even loved her. She was really beautiful, educated, impeccable, discreet, and made a good impression. The two lovers sought privacy in a Prussian castle, Finkenstein, when Napoleon asked Marie to join him there. The honeymoon lasted from April to June. The 20-year-old Marie was having the happiest time of her life. According to the practice of that time, she wrote to her legitimate husband to inform him about the new situation. She had become the mistress of Emperor Napoleon, the most powerful man in Europe. Moreover, she had already fallen in love with Napoleon. When she returned to Poland, she went back to her childhood town, but during the spring of 1808, Napoleon invited her to join him in Paris. She was magnificently looked after by him, and she stayed in a splendid residence. She was enjoying the social life of Paris But she returned to Poland when Napoleon had to leave and deal with the military campaign in Spain. The Emperor and Marie would write letters to one another whilst he was busy fighting his wars. After his success in the Battle of Wagram in July 1809, Napoleon had time to enjoy life, and Marie was asked again to join him in Vienna. Their affair continued throughout the summer, and soon Marie became pregnant. In September, when she broke the news, Napoleon was very happy. He realized that he was actually able to have children. With his inability to have children removed, his next move was to divorce Josephine. Marie went back to Poland to give birth to their child there. Although on the 10th of January 1810, Napoleon divorced his first wife, Josephine de Beauharnais, on the grounds that she could not produce an heir, he didn't marry Marie because of his political calculations. Napoleon needed to find a powerful alliance to be related to in order to strengthen the French Empire. Shrewd and calculated, Napoleon chose Marie-Louise de Habsburg as his wife. They married in April 1810, and a year after their marriage, his new wife actually bore him a son in March 1811. But his real love was Marie Walewska, who would always stay around him. On the 4th of May 1810, Marie Walewska gave birth to Napoleon's son, Alexander Joseph, who was legally acknowledged by Count Walewski as his own son. Although their love affair had ended, Napoleon was thinking about Marie, and he sent her a letter to invite her to Paris. In November 1810, she came to Paris with her child, and Napoleon was really generous with them. She was able to settle in a grand residence arranged by Napoleon in Paris. He arranged financial support for her and their child. They would remain dear to one another, and her loyalty to him would never die. When in 1812 Napoleon left for Russia, Marie went to Poland to divorce her husband. After the disastrous Russian campaign, Napoleon's lucky star began to wane. When in the spring of 1814 he was facing exile and Paris was occupied, Napoleon attempted suicide, and Marie rushed to see him at Fontainebleau, but was unable to get into his locked room. After Napoleon's abdication in April 1814, his legitimate wife, Marie-Louise, returned to Vienna with her son. Marie Walewska was his visitor in his first exile on the island of Elba for 2 days in September 1814. She brought their 4-year-old child with her, and they spent a marvelous time together. Careful not to cause any suspicion, and worried his wife might hear about Napoleon's encounter with Marie, he sent her away anonymously back to Paris. They saw each other again when he escaped from Elba in March 1815 and came to Paris to regain his throne. After his lost battle at Waterloo, Napoleon abdicated, and Marie and Napoleon saw each other for the last time on the 26th of June 1815 at Malmaison. One can only imagine how heartbreaking it was for them, saying their last goodbyes. Did Marie Walewska want to follow him in exile on the island of St. Helena, unlike his legitimate wife? Did Napoleon decline? Was he thinking about the harsh living conditions on that remote island? We will never know, but regardless, the end was incredibly sad. The following year, Marie married Count Philippe Antoine d'Ornano, Napoleon's cousin, in Brussels. Her new marriage would be short-lived, as she died in Paris on the 11th of December 1817 after the birth of her third child. She was only 31 years old. 4 years later, Napoleon, ill and isolated on the island of St. Helena, also died at the age of 51. Napoleon and Marie's son, Count Alexander Joseph Colonna Walewski, had an impressive career as a diplomat and cabinet minister in France after acquiring French citizenship. About this man's destiny, the well-known author Voltaire wrote, "On the 17th of August 1661, at 6 in the evening, Fouquet was King of France. At 2 in the morning, he was nobody." An exceptional party held in the king's honor sealed Fouquet's fate irreversibly. Instead of impressing Louis XIV, he triggered the king's envy. His dazzling success and impressive career came to a sudden stop. How did Fouquet fall so spectacularly? And more importantly, why? His story began on the 27th of January 1615, when Nicolas Fouquet was born to François Fouquet and Marie de Maupeou, a couple living in Paris. His father was a member of the Noblesse d'Europe and worked as a judicial officer and councillor to the Parliament of Paris. His mother belonged to an influential family of lawyers who were well connected to financial affairs of the state. Although initially Nicolas was prepared for a career in the church, his parents sensed that he was better suited for a career dealing with legal matters, as he was very intelligent and he liked studying law and science. He studied for his law degree at the Parisian Faculty of Law, and in a few years' time his father helped Nicolas to buy for himself the position of Master of Requests, which was a council of the French Council of State. In 1640, when he was 25 years old, Nicolas married Louise Fouché, who had considerable wealth. Shortly after, his father died, and Nicolas inherited some of his wealth. His wife also died the following year, leaving behind a 6-month-old daughter. By then, Nicolas was able to buy some land at Vaux, about 33 miles southwest of Paris, and styled himself Vicomte de Vaux. During the next 8 years, Nicolas advanced his career by holding public official positions in the provinces and then with the army of Chief Minister Cardinal Mazarin. His future was looking promising. As a close assistant to Mazarin, he was introduced to the royal court and was permitted in 1650 to buy the position of chief prosecutor to the Parliament of Paris. The following year, Fouquet, aged 36, married again. His new wife was Marie-Madeleine du Castil Villereuil, whose family was one of the wealthiest in Europe. When Mazarin took Anne of Austria and Louis XIV out of Paris, following the Second Fronde uprising, Nicolas remained loyal to the cardinal whilst he was in exile. Fouquet kept the cardinal informed about the situation at court and guarded his property. As soon as Mazarin made his triumphal return to Paris in 1653, Fouquet's loyalty was rewarded with the office of Superintendent of Finances. At 25, Nicolas was in his new post. He was able to decide how the royal treasury was run, and he also took part in the negotiations with the financiers who lent money to the king. At the same time, he still kept his position as chief prosecutor, thus being able to maintain any financial transactions confidential from being investigated. Becoming increasingly wealthy, Fouquet was able to fund the cardinal's various projects by lending him vast amounts of money. When Jean-Baptiste Colbert was brought into the government by Mazarin, he became Fouquet's enemy. Wanting to strengthen his position as Mazarin's assistant, Colbert wrote a memoir to Mazarin to express his suggestions on tax reforms, claiming that the taxes paid by the people were not entirely used for the king's benefit, and moreover, Fouquet was accused of using royal funds for his own enrichment. Mazarin stopped short of defending Fouquet. On the death of Mazarin in March 1661, Fouquet firmly believed he was in the position to be the minister in charge of the government when, shockingly, the young king decided to reorganize the country and rule independently without a chief minister. France was facing financial difficulties, and Louis was adamant he wanted to rectify the situation. Meanwhile, Nicolas was getting wealthier and more powerful by the day. Fouquet's rival Colbert decided to keep the king informed about Fouquet's financial transactions and undertakings. The king's most important minister, Nicolas, became the victim of Colbert's plot. Fouquet's love of artistic beauty and refinement were displayed in a lavish chateau he built between 1658 and 1661 at Vaux. His dream of building this magnificent chateau was brought to life by Leveux, Lebrun, and Le Nôtre. Nicolas amassed a large collection of manuscripts, paintings, jewels, and art objects displayed throughout the chateau. Artists and authors such as Jean de La Fontaine, Pierre Corneille, and Paul Scarron were his frequent visitors and entertainers. His chateau became the envy of France, and it was the most beautiful chateau before the Palace of Versailles became the chateau. Wanting to impress the king, Nicolas invited Louis to a fête at his chateau where the king was magnificently entertained. The king and his mother arrived together at Vaux-le-Vicomte. Passing through the magnificent gardens designed by Le Nôtre, amazed by the refinement of the chateau, the king did not betray his feelings of anger and envy, but inside he was fuming. Although Fouquet's fate had been decided earlier, when Colbert was drip-feeding the king with fabricated lies about Nicolas, the lavish soirée sealed Fouquet's destiny. The king's most important minister became the victim of Colbert's plot, and his intentions to flatter the king failed. 3 weeks after the party, the king travelled to Nantes with his government. Unaware of the king's intentions, Fouquet also attended the ministers' meeting. On the 5th of September 1661, the king's musketeer D'Artagnan received the instruction to carry out a mission to arrest Fouquet. The king's musketeers were waiting outside the council chamber, and as soon as he was leaving, Fouquet was arrested. After his arrest in Nantes, Nicolas would travel from prison to prison, firstly to Château d'Angers and then to Château d'Amboise, and from there to Vincennes on the last day of the year 1661. He would be on 24-hour surveillance, guarded by D'Artagnan, awaiting his trial. The trial of the century dragged on for 3 years, and Fouquet was accused of high treason and personal enrichment from the royal revenues. During the trial, Nicolas defended himself as best as he could, given his professional legal background. He even received public support, but his chances of winning were diminishing, and time was running out. Although the judges voted to expel Nicolas from France, Louis was not happy with the decision and intervened to change the sentence to life imprisonment. Clearly, the king perceived himself as God, and he wanted to be seen as such. Yet the injustice of Fouquet's case has remained a topic for French legal experts for centuries. The most terrible prison was awaiting for Fouquet. The insalubrious and cold fortress of Pignerol would become his new residence for the rest of his life. He was able to see his wife after 15 years, when she was allowed to visit. Shortly after, Nicolas died mysteriously on the 23rd of March 1680. His death was associated with the mysterious transfer of a secret prisoner from the fortress of Pignerol to the fortress prison of an island on the French Riviera, the island Sainte-Marguerite. An aristocratic prisoner in an iron mask arriving in a new prison sparked interest for authors such as Voltaire and Alexandre Dumas, who based their fiction writings on Fouquet's downfall. In many ways, Fouquet's legacy is still alive at Versailles, where Louis decided to build a more beautiful chateau to outshine Vaux-le-Vicomte. He employed the same architects who had worked for Fouquet, and they produced the most splendid house in France.